Okay, welcome to our Spanish Fork Library gardening class. My name is Liz Binks. I'm a horticulture assistant at Utah State University Extension in the Provo office. I sit at the diagnostics desk and answer questions and emails regarding anything gardening. And I was asked to come today, and we came up with some good topics that I think are really applicable right now. So I'm going to take a few minutes to talk about pruning basics, a few minutes to talk about common pests like squash bugs, aphids, the things that you see a lot of, and then just a few seconds about vertical gardening. And so I'm just going to dive right in. I brought one of the trimmings from my crab apple tree. Thank you. And just to do to make it visual, I guess. But first of all, what's pruning? It's to remove unwanted material from your plants. So we can minimize pruning, first of all, by choosing the right plant for the right space. So if you choose a 6-foot shrub where you want a 3-foot shrub to be, you will battle that every year. So first off, let's minimize our workload and just plant something that'll fit. That's easy enough. But we don't do that all the time. And so, or we move into a home that already has established plantings and we're gonna be pruning. So let's talk about some bad reasons to prune. 1, because your next door neighbor is doing it. Just because someone's pruning doesn't mean you need to. If you can get away without pruning every year, that means you've chosen the right shrub for the right spot. So congratulate yourself. Another bad reason to prune, just you're bored. Or you're like, I need a spring cleanup project. I need to get out there. I'm just gonna start cutting. Or you wanna open things up. You wanna let the air in. And so it's generally not needed. Don't stress about it. What are some good reasons? You have diseased or broken branches. You need to remove those. A hazard. You have some dead or decaying branches over your driveway, or they're interfering with, branches are interfering with your line of sight when you're rounding a corner of your property, when you're driving. You have a tree that's brushing against your house. Utility line clearance, but always call the power company for that. Don't worry about that one yourself. Or also, the most common reason that you would need to prune is for form. You want to direct growth the way you want to direct it. You have so much more control than you think. So, and when is the right time to prune? Well, really you can prune anytime, but optimally would be when early spring, late winter, when things are still dormant. That would be the best time. You might notice that your birches, maples, walnuts are going to bleed a lot, but that's okay. Just let it weep its sap. It'll clear up in a few days. That's just the best time to prune. Why wouldn't we want to prune in late fall? It opens up some fresh cuts, and then you might get an early cold front move in, and it just would freeze that wound. Why wouldn't you want to prune in the middle of summer? Sometimes when you prune in the middle of summer, it pushes growth, and then you're going to be, so in fact what you think you're doing is restricting growth, but actually it's just going to encourage growth. And then you've pushed all this new tender material out, and then early frost comes through and zaps your tree. So we all prune all the time, we all do it, but just if you have a choice, do it late winter, early spring. I've heard once that a true gardener, the only tool that he really needs, or she, is this. You don't need your chainsaws because you've taken care of it when it was this big. I'm not to that point. I take large cuts still. But I think there's a lot of wisdom and truth to that. If you can think ahead, how is this plant going to grow and take care of it when it's small, you will have no need for anything bigger. So something interesting to think about. Maybe just one pair of loppers. But beyond that, I don't think you would need much. One quick note of caution. If you're pruning something that is diseased, consider sterilizing your pruning tool between cuts. It's as simple as taking a Clorox wipe and just wiping the blade before you make your next cut. And that will sterilize it because you don't want to spread. One common disease that we deal with a lot in Utah is fire blight. That's on your apples and pears, or flowering pears maybe. And it's just it's a bacteria that's spread when there's a rain event while it's in blossom, and it will just splash that bacteria from blossom to blossom, and then it will just slowly creep into the twig and then slowly creep down, and it could take a few years and it would take out your tree. So if you see that tip of an apple tree or a pear tree bending over like a shepherd's crook and it's blackened and shriveled, you can probably guess you have fire blight. And so that would be an excellent time to prune it out, 8 to 12 inches below where it's shriveled, prune it out, and then sanitize before you make another cut. So that's just one example of why you would do that. Now I want to kind of get into the basics of actual pruning. So there are nodes and internodes. A node would be anything like this. This is a node where you have a little growth shoot. Internode would be between growth shoots. So between this one and this one, that spot is an internode. The reason that's important and why you want to know that is because you always want to prune right above a node. You don't want to leave a stub. Why wouldn't you want to leave a stub? They're unsightly, and it's just an opportunity for dead and decaying tissue to contract a disease. And like I said, it's unsightly. And I'm all about aesthetics. So, for example, if I wanted to do a head cut on this branch right here. So say my tree is going like this, whoa, all the way to the top of the ceiling. And it's a fruit tree probably is where you most use this. And you have the central leader and you want to shorten it because you want to keep your tree. I wouldn't recommend this on a landscaping tree, but on a fruit tree you would do this. You're making a heading cut. So you'd go right above a node and just get it right there at an angle rather than just haphazardly cutting. Because now I've just left, well, no, that was a node, but let's pretend it's not there. Well, I'll go right below it. Okay, I've just left a stub, and that's just going to deaden and decay and look unsightly. Now, on a little tree like this, you may not notice it, but on a big tree, for instance, I have a big locust, big honey locust that had a branch that was reaching over the driveway, and I could see that the previous owners didn't like that branch. It was this big around, and I have yet to take care of it, but there's a big stub of that branch coming off the tree this long, and it bugs me, but I don't own a chainsaw, and that's the only way to take care of that with something that big. And so it's a stub this long, and it's not attractive at all. And also, from that stub, lots of water shoots could just spring right off of that, and then you're just controlling more growth. So if you take care of it the way you need to, you won't have those water sprouts. Water sprouts are, you might, let me think, I don't really, anything that grows straight up. I don't see anything growing straight up. I wouldn't consider that a water sprout. They're really tender and soft. Anyway, peaches, actually I should say apples and pears get a lot of water sprouts. So we know where to cut. We know to cut right above a node. We know to cut at an angle. You don't want to leave a stub, nor do you want to make a flush cut. So a flush cut would be where you cut so close, and this would be more applicable on something large. But if you cut so close to the thing that I can't even cut that close with these clippers on this, but you're cutting so close that it's almost like scalping the tree. You need to leave a bump, but not a stub. Why, you ask? That is because you want it to heal. And if you scalp that tree right along the edge, if you take your handsaw because you have a big branch you're taking off, and you just scalp right along that tree, you've just opened up a wound bigger than the tree can really recover from. You have taken off a lot of the tissue that would have healed and calloused over, and that tree is going to have a hard time recovering from a cut like that. And I see those too in a lot of places, and eventually they may recover, or they will recover, but it looks really sad. I feel bad for the tree, and it just takes longer. So this is kind of a better example. So you have a collar. Sorry, I'm using my branch collar. A branch collar just means that thickened area around the base of that branch. And then you have a bark ridge, where you can kind of see how that bark right there has formed an actual ridge of bark where it's a little rougher. You need to leave both of those things. So I don't know if these are sharp enough to cut, but I would want to cut starting at the bark ridge to the at a downward, outward slant to leave the bark collar. Does that make sense? So I would cut right there, and it would leave a bump, but not a stub. And that will give your tree its best chance to callus over and heal that wound, because basically pruning is tree surgery, and so you need it to heal. And you want to give it its best chance. If you leave a stub cut or a flush cut, you have a better chance of getting disease and pests, fungal attacks. So I think that's something that I've noticed a lot when I drive around. When you think about something a lot and that's where your eyes go, I look at pruning cuts and I think, oh darn it, But really, if a tree is properly pruned, you won't even notice that it's been pruned, which could lead us into topping a tree really fast. What is topping a tree? It's when you haphazardly decide to shorten the height of a tree. You don't care where you cut, and you just take it there, take it there, take it there, and then you've left tons of stubs, and those stubs are all pointing upward, and they're just going to produce tons of water sprouts, and then you're trying to control something that's uncontrollable. So instead, take that branch that's offending you down to its source. So say I want my tree to grow this way, and I don't care for this one. Take it to its source, and do yourself a favor. You won't have to deal with that again. But if you leave a stub, it's just going to burst out with more growth. So just take it to its source, remove it there with that downward, outward angle, leave the bark collar, start at the ridge, go to the bark collar, and then your tree will be happy with you. And you'll be happy because you won't be correcting that problem next year. And again, every year from then on. So what we're trying to make are directional cuts. One last thing that I think is really important is how much control you have in the way your tree grows. So perhaps you have a house and the tree is growing and brushing against the house, and you don't care to have it brushing against your house. I don't blame you. So this is your house, this is your tree. You could remove it right here, but you'll be fighting that forever. It will always continually be growing towards your house. Just take it back to its source and remove it right there. And say you don't like this one either. Take it right there, and then you're like, well, my tree's a little lopsided. That's okay. You planted it by the house. You're going to have to deal with that. Better a lopsided tree than a tree that you're continually battling as it approaches your house. And then say that you want this particular branch, instead of growing toward the house, say you've made a cut here. Guess where it's going to grow? Right back towards your house. So that's the kind of control I'm talking about. Take it right here, and then it will grow that way. Does that make sense? You have a lot of control. And this is particularly pertinent when you're pruning fruit trees, because you want to encourage growth to go outward at a 45-degree angle. You'll get more sun exposure, you'll get more fruit, you'll get happier fruit, more delicious fruit, and you will be pruning less. If you're pushing growth straight up, you won't be able to reach that fruit. So, and if you don't want droopers either, but anyway, a 45-degree angle is what you want to promote for your fruit trees, and then everyone will be happy. Let me just make sure I covered everything I wanted to cover. There's one last concept that's really fun, and I encourage you guys, if you want to watch a YouTube video, I just Googled the 3-cut method today, and it was an This Old House Ask Roger thing where he did a 3-cut method. It was so charming, and he talked about the 3-cut method, how to properly prune a big branch. So these little ones you can just clip right at the collar. But say that you're the size of a Barbie, and this is the tree you're dealing with, and you don't care for this branch right here. So if you were to cut it, the first cut, from the branch ridge from the branch ridge to the bottom base of the collar like that, it very well could be that the weight of this heavy branch, as you're cutting it, is going to pull the limb down before you're ready, and then strip the bark off the side of that tree. You can imagine that happening. So the 3-cut method would be this. You go out about 2 feet from the tree. You're going to lighten the weight. You're going to go 2 feet from the tree, make an undercut about a 1/3 way through the branch. Then make go out to about 2 inches from that undercut and make an overcut until the branch completely just comes off. And then you go ahead and make that final cut so that you've lightened the weight. It's not going to strip your bark. Sorry if anyone can see that, but you get the idea. And the video is charming. So if you want to see it in action, he shows what not to do, and he shows the bark stripping away, and then he shows you what to do. So that's the Ask Roger 3-cut method on YouTube. Just as a quick aside, if you have fruit trees and you're wondering how to prune them, there are lots of great demonstrations you can find nearby. The time is past. That was in March, so we're past our time. But it's better to prune now than not at all, or your fruit will be out of reach. If we're talking about peaches and plums and nectarines, I should say. But if you're starting out and you've planted a fruit tree, take the time necessary, and on this there is a great web resource regarding that to learn about form, different structures, different pruning systems for different types of fruit trees. So, for instance, stone fruits like peaches, nectarines, maybe not apricots are a little different, but plums, they prefer an open base system where you will buy a beautiful little tree and you'll go to 30 inches above and you're just going to remove everything above that and your heart will break, but that's what you do, and then because you want to encourage a vase-like system. With apples, it's something called a modified leader, where you'll choose some scaffolding branches here, go up a foot, let it create some more scaffolding branches here, go up another few feet, maybe one more layer maybe, and then you'll head off that leader. So there's been so much research done. You'll notice when you drive by orchards that they really do have a system pertaining to whichever type of fruit they're growing, and it's really worth learning. So that resource I know, I'm sorry, these are so long, but the second one from the top, that would be the resource I'm referring to. The first one is an excellent general pruning resource, and then the last one says, gardening guys and gals, they are USU Extension professors, and they are so much fun to watch, and they give great demonstrations on how to do anything you can think of pertaining to the garden. Okay, let's move on for a few minutes to common pests. So something that we really stress at the Extension Office is a philosophy of thought called integrated pest management. It's I'm going to read the quote exactly from the Master Gardener Handbook. It says, it's a sustainable approach to pest management which employs a variety of strategies to keep pests at a tolerable level. The goal is to suppress pests so that plants are not overly damaged. Complete eradication is not a realistic goal. It can be costly and damaging to the environment and other organisms. So, in my terms, I would say that it's a way to balance the way you're controlling your pests. You're not out to eradicate them all, because to do that, you'll eradicate all insects everywhere, bees included. It's just a way to balance it. There are lots of different approaches. I'm going to give you a quick example, and then I'm going to go into a little bit more technicalities. So for instance, squash bugs. Do you guys deal with squash bugs on your zucchini and pumpkins? They're horrendous. I hate them. They're ugly. They're stinky. They're gross. They are stinky too, you know, because you've squished them. So you haven't looked at your zucchini in a couple weeks. It's mid-June. You go out there and you're like, oh my goodness, not only are there adults squash bugs, but there are little nymphs, and then you look under the leaves and there are eggs everywhere, and you're disgusted, and you're like, how can this even go well? Well, if some ideas would have been, monitor at least weekly, more often if you can, depending on how many zucchini plants, you decide what's applicable or what's manageable for you, but monitor. B, a mechanical approach would be just hand removal. It's as easy as can be. I know, we have some flinching. But you could even take out some tape and just put it on those eggs and just strip them off that way if you didn't want to touch them with your thumb. If you find adults, I don't particularly like to squish them with bare hands, but I put them between two rocks and I give them a good squish that way. The little nymphs you can rub off. But before you even get to that point, there are things you could have done to even exclude them completely. So one of those options would have been, don't plant them till June. And I'll tell you why. So those squash bugs are out trying to find a home to establish in May. And they're ready to lay eggs in May. If they don't have an opportunity in your garden, guess where they'll go? Your neighbors. And then they get,
Caught them up and everything else.
We love our neighbors.
Sorry,
but if they planted theirs in May, they will get the squash bugs, and you won't, because they're established in their zucchini. They're happy there. They have no reason to come and find yours. So wait till June. And zucchini will definitely, you'll still get plenty of zucchini. Too much. So just wait till June. It's awesome. I do that, and last year I will tell you, I had 0 squash bugs. That doesn't always work, but last year I had 0. And I monitor to check. Another way to exclude them would be plant them when you're ready, even if you wanted to do it in May, but then use a lightweight row cover over the top of them. That creates a mechanical barrier. They can't penetrate that row cover. They'll fly off to your neighbors, and you have a zucchini that's establishing, and then at the point at which it develops female flowers is when you uncover it and then start monitoring for squash bugs, because obviously you need bees to pollinate. So just another method of exclusion. Pesticides are definitely an option, but they're very ineffective on adult squash bugs. They don't really seem to care. They're more effective on the nymphs when they're little and tiny, but if you have nymphs, you also have adults. So I feel like it's a losing battle. We don't really recommend using pesticides on squash bugs. It just doesn't seem to work that well. I'm trying to think if there are any other things I use for oh, one more thing, traps. So if you have, I just thought of 2 more methods. Okay, if you have squash bugs, you know you have them, you're trying to get them, but you feel like they've gotten away from you. You can trap them. Just put some old boards, some heavy cardboard on the ground next to your zucchini, and then at night they seek shelter. They'll go under there. You come out first thing in the morning before they get a chance to get out. They're under there. Take care of them like that at that time. Another method that is really cool, USU Extension even has a really quick YouTube video about it. Take a bucket of water, go to the crown of your zucchini plant, pour it over there, and watch them come out, and then you just nab them. It's pretty exciting.
That's awesome.
So those are some integrated pest management ideas of how to control squash bugs.
Set it up that you put like a screen under the plant, and then when you poured it,
you could just that's a good idea.
That'd be thinker. You're gonna beat the bugs.
Absolutely. Earwigs are another thing. You can roll up some newspaper and put them nearby the plants, and they crawl in there at night, and then you just, in the morning before they have a chance to leave, just discard the newspaper. You don't even have to look at them.
Or put it in your neighbor's garden.
Or put it in your neighbor's garden. There are so many, So there are lots of ways to be creative and lots of ideas online. We don't need to resort to pesticides. Now, there are a lot of pesticides that are really specific to one pest. And if you can choose those, do that. If you're going to resort to pesticides, because a broad spectrum pesticide is exactly that. It takes out all the beneficial natural enemies of those very pests you're trying to rid yourself of. So, for example, aphids. Aphids on your roses, for instance, that's really common. So, did you know a stiff stream of water will knock the aphids off faster than a pesticide ever could work, and they will not crawl back up. You just dislodged their mouth parts. They're no longer viable. And you'll have to come back 3 or 4 days later because more little eggs have hatched, and do it again. Just repeat it for a couple weeks until the ladybugs and the lacewings the populations have had a chance to catch up to your aphid population, and then they'll take care of them for you. But if you've just administered a broad spectrum pesticide, you killed your aphids, and then you've killed all the pests, all the beneficials that are going to take care of them for you. So you could use water, you could use insecticidal soap, you could use horticultural oil, neem oil, all of those things. Like an insecticidal soap or an oil would suffocate them. The water just knocks them off. It's super easy and super effective, and water won't cost you a trip to the store or money out of the bank, except obviously you pay for water. But that quick stream won't cost you much. So easy ways to get rid of pests that don't involve pesticides. And then we're protecting. And if you get a chance, and I meant to bring in a picture of a ladybug larva, but if you've never seen one, please Google that, because they don't look like what you think they'll look like. They look like little black crocodiles crawling around your plants, and you'll think you have an infestation of something horrible, but you don't. You have ladybug larvae, and they eat more voraciously than the adults do. So they are awesome. So keep those. You want to keep them, and Google that so that you know what they look like. You know what you're looking for.
There's a question.
Oh,
Any
yeah.
tips on getting rid of box elder bugs?
So box elder bugs are a nuisance pest. That means they're not going to hurt you. They're not going to hurt your plants. They're not going to hurt your house, but they will crawl into your house, and they will try to get warm on the south side of your house. And so by nuisance pest, it means toleration if you possibly can. If it's out of control, maybe you could use a pesticide. They're not going to hurt anything. Seal the cracks and crevices of your windows so they can't get in. And then, tolerate them if possible. But I feel bad because maybe they're excessive, and then you do what action you need to do. But one year, it was the weirdest, eeriest thing. And I didn't really understand very many insects at that time, but we lived in a cul-de-sac in Spanish Fork, and we had only lived there a year, and there was a lot of construction in the fields nearby. I don't know if that had anything to do with it. But for some reason, it was the year of the alien bug. There were these little tiny green insects that were traveling from north to south every day. You couldn't walk across the cul-de-sac without stepping on them. They were tiny, and they looked like turtles. They were actually kind of cute. I didn't want to know what they were, and I didn't want to ask because I was worried that somebody would descend and just fumigate everything. So I didn't know if it was something like the Japanese beetle where they'll freak out and come and sterilize your yard and say you can't garden for 10 years or something. I was worried. So I didn't say anything, but they would crawl up the fence and then go over. And so one day I just got aside, and I just, sometimes you just can't take the invasion of the alien bug. And so you take care of it the way you got to take care of it. I found out later they were stink bugs, green stink bugs, and I have no idea why there were thousands of them creeping through our neighborhood. But they weren't anything to be too concerned about. They weren't even stopping to eat, even though they do eat your desirable plants. So there's mechanical control, hand removal, water spray, plant guards, paper collars to prevent cutworm damage, sticky barriers to keep some of the insects from crawling up your plants. There's cultural control, where you explore the weak links of an insect's life cycle. So for instance, if you tilled in the late fall, you would expose a lot of eggs to the elements, and they wouldn't survive the winter. So just a light late fall tilling will expose some of those eggs. Over-fertilized plants are super attractive to pests. So, if you can water deeply but infrequently, don't over-fertilize, your healthier plants will be able to withstand pests. And then consider planting some tiny little flowers like yarrow or alyssum, or any little herb that grows a little tiny flower that would attract those beneficial insects, because they also will visit those flowers, they'll be attracted, and then they'll stay around for protein, and they'll eat those bugs you don't care to have. Biological control would be encouraging predators, ladybugs, lacewings. You can buy little bags of ladybugs, and they're so cute, and I don't blame you if you want to buy them. But they're going to fly away. They're not going to stay put. They're going to be your neighbors, right? So you could encourage them to come to your property by just having those little flowers, and then not spraying broad spectrum pesticides. So that would be a biological way. And then chemical control are the pesticides. There are always soft options. If you want to go to pesticides, there are things considered organic, like spinosad. There are things that target just that pest that you're after. So try to find those and use those rather than just something that will kill everything. And always follow your product label. Always to the T. If the bug's not on there, if your plant's not on there, find something that will take care of the problem for you. We talked about squash bugs, we talked about aphids. I want to give one more example, grasshoppers. So some years it feels like they're worse than others. But there are ways you can keep grasshoppers from even touching your plants. That would be a lightweight row cover if you had, greens that don't need to pollinate. But one thing that I think is really cool is something called Nolo bait, and we recommend Nolo bait often. It's I think it's wheat bran or something, but it's laced with a natural grasshopper pathogen. It's a type of fungus that once it's in their digestive system, they slow down, they start eating less, they'll eventually die, and then grasshoppers are cannibalistic, so they'll eat those dead bodies, and then those guys now have the pathogen in their digestive tract. It's the gift that keeps on giving. You can buy it at IFA, you can buy it probably at Cal Ranch, but Nolo bait is cool. Now, it's spelled Nolobait. There are other baits for grasshoppers as well, but I think that one's particularly cool. But the trick is you need to get them when they're tiny. So when they're do you know a grasshopper baby? They're cute, and I feel so bad, but I sprinkle it anyway. and then if it gets wet, you'll need to re-sprinkle it because once it's gotten wet from sprinklers, it's no longer effective. So it's just kind of something you spread like a granular fertilizer around the plants. As they're eating, they will eat some, and the frustrating thing is you may not get to see that process with your eyes, but just rest assured it's happening and it's exciting. And then one more thing is if you have grasshoppers, your neighbors have grasshoppers, and if you take care of your grasshoppers, but your neighbor doesn't, it doesn't mean much. So it's really best done as a community effort. If a whole neighborhood could do that, think of the possibilities.
I think we just need some seagulls.
I think we just need some seagulls. So those are 3 common pests. And then I just have one quick, I want to spend just a couple minutes on vertical gardening, just because I think it is so much fun, because we want to get more with less space. Our yards are getting smaller, and I think our desire to grow our own food is getting larger, just as a society as a whole. And so one way we can capitalize on what we have is to grow up. So I listed some sources on this source sheet where you can get some great ideas, but there's an extension professor named Sheridan Hansen, and she does the Garden Guys and Gals videos with 2 other professors, and she also helps manage the Urban Farm Demonstration Garden. And I have never been there, but after watching some of these videos she's done, I have a goal to get up there and visit this demonstration garden. She spends.
It's in Kaysville?
It's in Kaysville. She has 1/8 of an acre that she's devoted to this urban garden, and she wants to see how much she can get out of it. And she's got cut flowers, she's got a vineyard, she's got fruit trees, vegetables, and berries, brambles, all in this 1/8 of an acre. And most of it's going straight up.
And so, how high does she go?
Oh yeah. Well, all of those are spread out, but she's got some great trellising systems for tomatoes. Tomatoes, there's determinate and indeterminate. Determinate are more of a bushy type tomato. They can be withheld in those cages. But most of the tomatoes we want are indeterminate, and they get so big. So she has some great ideas on that YouTube video particularly, where she helps you grow those tomatoes up, those indeterminate tomatoes. Another one of her videos talks about how to prune them so that they don't get out of control.
Once you're growing them.
Yeah, once you're growing them up, they'll still go out of control, but if you prune them correctly, you can have more varieties and less space. So she had a 10-foot row where she used some electrical conduit secured with T-posts on either end. And so that electrical conduit came up 5 feet, then it had an elbow. She talks about costs. I mean, it costs $60 at Home Depot to go up, and then the elbow, and then straight over. And then she uses tomato twine and tomato stakes, and she planted a tomato every foot along that 10-foot span,
Just went up.
and then they just goes right up. And then you have 10 varieties of tomatoes, and you train them to go up. You just loop that string around, come down and stake it to the bottom. And then as that tomato climbs up, you use these little tomato clips that you can buy on Amazon for just a few dollars, and just clip it up and let it go, and then you're pruning all the suckers that come off in any direction. One really important thing, though, that I hadn't realized was she said that if you're removing all that foliage, shade's important. So if you were growing it east to west, to hang a 30% shade cloth on the south side would benefit that. Or if you were growing it north to south, hanging it on the west side. And just a light, airy shade cloth could go along that electrical conduit and provide the necessary shade to keep your fruit from sunburning. Anyway, I just thought it was brilliant, and I really wanted to give those resources out.
Is there
Anybody
anything,
cares.
so vertical gardening, does that include like aeroponics and hydroponics as well, or are those kind of their own?
They're their own thing. So,
Can you repeat the question?
okay, so does that include aeroponics or hydroponics? That would be its own category. Vertical gardening would be more about growing on trellises, obelisks, cattle panels. I mean, super cheap. $16 cattle panel, 2 T-posts at the end and 1 in the middle. And that cattle panel is secure and reusable. And you can grow cucumbers. You can grow little mini pumpkins. You can grow even
but
little
we're doing
slightly larger
all
pumpkins.
Traditional methods. So
All
they're-
traditional methods.
But we're going up.
But we're just going up.
Okay.
I think it is exciting.
Cool.
In 2008, when the economy was tanking, I felt the need to grow as much produce as I possibly could in my backyard. I just had this driving desire. So I got a bunch of fruit trees and started to learn how to prune them and how to thin them and what to use to spray. So I had this row of fruit trees, and then I had raised beds where I was trying to incorporate as much as I could using, succession planting. And so I'd grow peas, and then when they were done, I'd grow bush beans. And then when they were done, I could grow spinach for the fall. And just utilizing my space as much as I could. And then I started weighing my food. I got really kind of fanatical about it. Then I thought, this is silly. And then I gave up on weighing. But there were things that I learned from that experiment that helped me feel more self-sufficient. It helped me realize how much food you really can produce in a small area. And it gave me a great desire to try everything. So there were foods that I had never eaten, but I'm like, if I grow it, I'll probably give it a try. Do you know the difference?
Yeah.
Yeah, you know
If
the
you've
difference.
actually invested
Yeah.
some time in it,
Yeah,
you're like, even this is
probably.
gross, I'll eat it at least once.
Absolutely.
Because I spent all season
Exactly.
growing it.
And I had tried edamame at a restaurant for the first time, and I'm like, well, that's fun. So then can you grow edamame here? And yes, you absolutely can.
Really?
And it is so much better when you grow it yourself.
Oh, yeah.
It really is. And with potatoes, my friend was saying, why grow potatoes? You can buy them at the store for some little money, but you can't buy little Russian banana fingerlings at the store. You can't buy my favorite potato is called a German butterball. It is so good. You can get the seed potatoes at IFA. They're little yellow potatoes, and they're so good. And you can't find them at the store. So, just experimenting with different varieties, different foods you've never tried. Devoting a spot to asparagus. It's a perennial crop. It takes 3 years, really, to be able to harvest. Start this year. And then, because
I don't
3
know
years,
if I
you
want
either have
asparagus
asparagus
that
or you
bad.
won't. So, it's a big investment. But then you'll have asparagus indefinitely. I just love that. I love everything about it. So that's the end of my presentation. So I'm happy to take any questions, or we can talk, or we can have a discussion. You can tell us what you love or what works for you.